There is a lake in Antarctica sealed for millions of years, and there are places on this planet just as strange, still standing in plain sight, that most people walk straight past without ever looking up. In the mountains of a small island off the coast of Yemen, there is a tree that bleeds. When you cut its bark, the sap runs bright red, and it dries into a crimson resin that traders have carried across oceans for 2,000 years. The tree grows in the shape of a giant flipped umbrella, thousands of thin branches fanning outward into a perfect dome, and there is nothing else on Earth that looks quite like it. Botanists call it a living fossil, a survivor from an age that ended long before the deserts of Arabia existed. And it is slowly disappearing. On the western coast of the United States, there is a single organism that covers 106 acres and weighs more than 6,000 tons. From a distance, it looks like an ordinary forest of 47,000 trees. It is not a forest. It is one tree, connected underground by a single root system, and it may be one of the oldest living things on the planet. It has been alive, by some estimates, for tens of thousands of years. And right now, for reasons that took scientists decades to understand, it is beginning to die. In the humid lowlands of the Philippines, there is a tree whose bark looks like it was painted by hand. Streaks of green, blue, purple, orange, and deep red spiral around the trunk, and the colors change week by week so that the same tree is never the same twice. No one adds the pigment. The tree makes it itself through a chemistry most people have never heard of. And high in the White Mountains of California, above 10,000 feet, on a slope so harsh that almost nothing else will grow, there is a twisted, half-dead pine that was already ancient when the pyramids were being built. It is the oldest known single tree on Earth, and the Forest Service refuses to tell anyone where it is. This is our countdown of the 15 strangest trees on Earth. Trees so beautiful, so ancient, and so bizarre that they genuinely look unreal. Stay until the end, because number one is that bleeding tree from Yemen, and its story reaches back into a chapter of Earth's history that most of us were never taught. Before we start, drop a comment and tell us where you are watching from right now. We want to see how far around the world this video travels. Number 15. The Jabuticaba, Brazil. At first glance, from a distance, a Jabuticaba tree in fruiting season looks like something has gone wrong with it. The trunk and the thick lower branches are completely covered in dark purple-black spheres, packed so densely that you can barely see the bark underneath. It looks less like fruit and more like the tree has broken out in some strange, beautiful rash. But this is exactly how the Jabuticaba is supposed to grow. Native to the states of Minas Gerais, Rio de Janeiro, and Sao Paulo, the Jabuticaba does something that almost no fruit tree in the temperate world does. Instead of flowering and fruiting out at the tips of its branches, it produces its flowers and its fruit directly on the surface of the trunk and the oldest wood. Botanists call this cauliflory, and the trait is written into the tree's scientific name, Plinia cauliflora, where cauliflora literally means trunk flowering. The obvious question is why? Why would a tree grow its fruit in the one place that seems most inconvenient? The answer, according to botanists, is a combination of survival strategies. Growing the fruit low on the trunk makes it accessible to ground-dwelling animals that cannot climb or fly, and those animals are exactly the ones the tree relies on to eat the fruit and spread its seeds across the forest floor. The thick trunk can also bear the weight of a heavy fruit load far better than a thin outer branch ever could. The fruit itself is often called the Brazilian grape. It has a tough, dark skin and a soft, sweet, translucent flesh, and it spoils within days of being picked, which is why most of the world has never tasted it. In Brazil, the harvest is a race against time. A tree can go from bare bark to a trunk completely armored in fruit and back to bare bark within a couple of weeks. The Jabuticaba is not rare, and it is not endangered. It is simply a reminder that our idea of what a normal tree looks like is a local habit, not a universal law. Somewhere in Brazil, right now, there is a tree wearing its entire harvest on its skin, exactly the way its ancestors have for millions of years. Number 14. The Boojum tree, Baja, California. If you drive far enough down the Baja California peninsula in Mexico, into the dry, rocky heart of the desert, you will start to see shapes on the horizon that do not make sense. Tall, pale columns rise out of the ground, some of them more than 50 feet high, tapering upward like enormous inverted carrots, their surfaces studded with short spiny branches, sometimes bending and twisting into loops and arches that seem to defy any sense of how a plant should grow. The tree is called the Boojum, or in Spanish, the Cirio. Its scientific name is Fuchsia culinaris, and it belongs to the Ocotillo family. It is nearly endemic to the Baja Peninsula, meaning this narrow strip of Mexican desert is very nearly the only place on the entire planet where it grows wild, with just a small population across the water in Sonora. The English name has a story of its own. It was given by a botanist named Godfrey Sykes of the Desert Laboratory in Tucson, Arizona, who borrowed it from a creature in Lewis Carroll's nonsense poem, The Hunting of the Snark. Sykes reportedly looked at the plant through his instrument, declared it a Boojum, and the name stuck. People often compare its wild, whimsical shapes to something drawn by Dr. Seuss, and the comparison is hard to argue with. But the Boojum is not a joke. It is a masterclass in desert survival. For most of the year, it stands bare and grey, looking half dead. Then, when the rains come, it bursts into small leaves along its spiny trunk, photosynthesizing as fast as it can before the water disappears again. It grows extraordinarily slowly, and the largest specimens, the ones bending overhead into strange arches, may be centuries old. Would you recognize it as a living tree if you saw it, or would you assume you were looking at some strange rock formation left behind by the desert? The Boojum forest of Baja is one of the few places on Earth where the plants look more alien than the landscape around them. Number 13. The Quiver tree forest, Namibia. About 14 kilometers northeast of the town of Keetmanshoop, in the dry south of Namibia, there is a forest of roughly 250 trees that photographers travel across the world to see. They are most famous at dusk, when the sky turns deep orange and the trees stand in black silhouette, their smooth branches forking again and again into rounded crowns against the light. It is one of the most photographed natural scenes in southern Africa, and it looks like something out of a dream. The tree is the Quiver tree, known locally by the Afrikaans name Kokerboom, and its scientific name is Aloedendron dichotomum. Despite its size, up to 9 meters tall, it is not a tree in the usual sense at all. It is a giant aloe, a succulent, storing water in its thick, tapering trunk to survive one of the harshest climates on the continent. Its name comes from the people who have lived alongside it for thousands of years. The indigenous San people traditionally hollowed out the tree's tubular branches to make quivers for their arrows. To the San, the tree is called choj. The branches are ideal for the purpose, light and fibrous, and the practice gave the tree the name it now carries in English across the world. Everything about the Quiver tree is built for endurance. Its branches are covered in a fine whitish powder that reflects the fierce desert sun. Its scientific name, dichotomum, refers to the way its stems split repeatedly into two as it grows, giving it that distinctive branching crown. And it grows slowly, so slowly that many of the trees standing in that forest today were already tall when the first European travelers passed through. But there is a shadow over the Quiver tree. Researchers studying its populations have documented die-offs in the hotter, drier northern parts of its range, even as it survives further south. For scientists, the Quiver tree has become something like a living thermometer, a plant whose slow retreat across the landscape tells a story about a changing climate written in wood and water. Number 12. The Strangler figs of Ta Prohm, Cambodia. Deep in the jungle of Angkor, in Cambodia, there is a temple that the forest is slowly eating. It was built around the year 1186 during the reign of the Khmer king Jayavarman VII as a Buddhist monastery and a center of learning. For centuries, it was home to thousands of people. Then the Khmer Empire faded, the monastery was abandoned, and the jungle moved in. What it left behind is one of the most haunting sights in the world. Enormous trees now grow directly out of the ruins. Their pale, muscular roots pour over the stone walls like frozen waterfalls, wrap around doorways, and plunge between the blocks of the temple, prying them apart and holding them together at the same time. The largest of them, the towering ones with roots like the legs of some giant creature, are silk cotton trees. The smaller, snaking ones that crawl across the rooftops and drop feelers down the walls are strangler figs. The strangler fig has one of the strangest licals in the plant kingdom. It often begins high up, when a bird drops a seed into a crack in the stonework or the crook of another tree. The seed germinates in the air, then sends roots downward toward the ground, gradually thickening and merging until they encase whatever they grew on. At Ta Prohm, what they grew on was a temple built by an empire. The temple was constructed without mortar, its stones fitted together by weight and precision alone. And that is exactly what made it so vulnerable. Every root that found a seam between two blocks could grow into it, widening the gap year by year. The result is a place where it is genuinely impossible to say whether the trees are destroying the temple or whether they are now the only thing holding it up. Ta Prohm became famous around the world when it appeared in the film Tomb Raider in 2001, but the site itself needs no help. It is a rare and unsettling image of what happens when human ambition stops and the forest is given 800 years to answer. The trees won. They usually do. Number 11. El Arbol del Tule, Mexico. In the town center of Santa Maria del Tule, in the Mexican state of Oaxaca, there is a single tree that stops people in their tracks. It is not especially tall. What makes it extraordinary is its width. The trunk of El Arbol del Tule is the widest tree trunk in the entire world, with a circumference measured at around 42 meters, roughly 138 feet. To wrap your arms around it, you would need about 30 people, standing fingertip to close the circle. The tree is a Montezuma cypress, and for a long time, there was a genuine scientific argument about what it actually was. The trunk is so vast, so buttressed and folded, that many people assumed it could not possibly be a single organism. Surely, they thought, this was several trees that had grown together over the centuries and fused into one mass. The question was only settled when DNA testing confirmed the answer. It is one tree, a single individual of a single genetic identity that has simply grown to an almost unbelievable size. Its exact age is uncertain, with estimates ranging widely, but its existence has been recorded for more than 2,000 years, and local Zapotec tradition holds it to be far older still. The surface of that enormous trunk is knotted and rippled into strange shapes, and visitors have long amused themselves by pointing out the forms hidden in the wood, faces, animals, creatures that seem to peer back out of the bark. The Tule tree is not a wild giant in a remote forest. It grows beside a church, in the middle of a small town, surrounded by daily life, and the community has protected it for generations. It is a reminder that the most extraordinary living thing for hundreds of miles can be standing quietly in a town square, so familiar to the people who live there that they barely glance at it, while strangers travel thousands of miles just to stand in its shade. Number 10. The Tree of Life, Bahrain. In the desert of Bahrain, a small island nation in the Persian Gulf, there is a single tree standing entirely alone. There are no other trees near it. There is no grass, no shrubs, no oasis, nothing but flat, cracked, sun-baked sand stretching in every direction. and in the middle of it stands a mesquite tree nearly 10 meters tall, green and thriving, that has been alive for more than 400 years. The locals call it Shajarat al-Hayat, the tree of life. For a long time, it was a genuine mystery. There is no visible source of fresh water anywhere near it. The surrounding land is one of the most inhospitable environments imaginable, with searing heat and almost no rainfall. And yet the tree does not just survive. It flourishes, drawing more than 350,000 visitors a year who come simply to see a living thing defying a landscape that should have killed it long ago. Science has since offered an explanation, and it is almost as impressive as the mystery. Researchers found that the tree's taproot drives down more than 100 feet beneath the surface, roughly 35 meters, reaching a source of water buried deep underground. Its compound leaves are shaped to shed heat, and the species carries a remarkable tolerance for salty, brackish conditions that would poison most plants. Together, those adaptations let a single seed that happened to land in exactly the right spot centuries ago grow into the loneliest tree on Earth. But the science has never quite dissolved the wonder. Local legend holds that Bahrain was once the site of the biblical Garden of Eden, and that this tree is the last living remnant of that paradise. Standing in front of it, in the middle of an empty desert, with the wind moving through leaves that have no business being there, it is easy to understand why people reached for that story. Some places feel like they need a myth to be complete. This is one of them. Number 9. The Great Banyan, India. In a botanical garden near Kolkata, in eastern India, there is what appears to be a dense, sprawling forest. You can walk beneath its canopy, along paths that wind between hundreds of separate trunks, shaded the entire way by a continuous roof of leaves that covers an area larger than 3 football fields. It feels unmistakably like a woodland, but it is not. Every single one of those trunks belongs to one tree. This is the Great Banyan, and it is one of the largest trees on Earth by the area of its canopy, spreading across roughly 18,900 square meters, close to 4.5 acres. It achieves this through the extraordinary biology of the Banyan family. The tree sends out branches, and from those branches, it drops aerial roots that grow downward until they reach the soil. Once anchored, each of those roots thickens into what looks exactly like a new trunk, a prop that supports the ever-widening canopy and lets the tree keep expanding outward, in principle, almost without limit. The Great Banyan has more than 3,700 of these prop roots reaching the ground. The tree is more than 250 years old, and its history includes a remarkable act of survival. In the 19th century, 2 cyclones damaged the tree and left its central trunk infected with fungus. To save the rest of the organism, botanists made a drastic decision. They cut out and removed the original main trunk entirely. Today, the Great Banyan lives on with no center at all, a tree defined not by a single core, but by the vast ring of descendants it has sent into the ground around the empty space where it began. Stand in the middle of it, and the strangeness sinks in slowly. There is no one place you can point to and say, that is the tree. The tree is all around you in every direction, a single living thing that long ago abandoned the idea of being in just one place. Number 8. General Sherman, the United States. In Sequoia National Park in California grows the largest single living thing on the entire planet, measured not by height, not by age, but by sheer volume of wood. Its name is General Sherman, and it is a giant sequoia. Standing at its base and looking up, the human mind struggles to process the scale. The trunk alone is estimated to weigh around 1,400 tons, and the tree measures over 31 meters, more than 100 feet, around its base. The numbers are difficult to hold in your head. General Sherman stands about 84 meters tall, roughly 275 feet, taller than the Statue of Liberty from the ground to the torch. Its total estimated volume is around 1,487 cubic meters of wood. It is not the tallest tree in the world, and it is not the oldest, but no other living organism packs so much of itself into a single body. By this measure, nothing else even comes close, and it is old. Estimates place General Sherman somewhere between 2,300 and 2,700 years of age, meaning this tree was already a substantial giant when the Roman Empire was at its height. Giant sequoias are among the most resilient organisms on Earth. Their bark can grow more than a foot thick, rich in a substance called tannin that resists fire and insects, and mature trees routinely survive the forest fires that periodically sweep through their groves. In fact, they need those fires. The heat helps open their cones and clears the ground so their seedlings can take root. What makes General Sherman almost impossible to fully grasp is the combination of all of it at once. This is not just an enormous tree. It is an enormous tree that has been standing in the same spot, adding a little more wood every single year, since before most of recorded history. Empires have risen and vanished in the time it has taken this one organism to grow, and it is still growing. Number 7. The Great Wisteria of Ashikaga, Japan. Every spring, in Ashikaga Flower Park in Tochigi, Japan, a single wisteria plant produces one of the most breathtaking sights in the natural world. For a few weeks, its branches erupt into a cascade of pale, purple, and pink flowers, hanging down in long trailing clusters until the entire canopy becomes a ceiling of blossom. Visitors walk underneath it in the evening, when it is lit from below, and describe the experience as standing beneath a glowing violet sky. Photographs of it have traveled the world, and many people, seeing them for the first time, assume they must be digital art. They are not. The Great Wisteria is around 160 years old, and its sheer size is what makes it possible. Its branches now spread across more than 1,000 square meters, an area equivalent to hundreds of tatami mats. A wisteria is naturally a climbing vine, not a self-supporting tree, and a plant of this age and size cannot hold itself up. So the park has built an enormous framework of steel beams and trellises above visitors' heads and trained the branches out across it, turning the vine into a vast floating roof of flowers. Without that support, the weight of the blooms in full season would tear the plant apart. It has been designated a natural monument by Tochigi Prefecture, a recognition of both its age and its beauty, and it is worth pausing on what that beauty actually is. This is not a single, spectacular tree in the way a sequoia is. It is a partnership, an ancient living vine, and the human engineering that holds it aloft, working together to produce something neither could achieve alone. For those few weeks each spring, the Great Wisteria becomes one of the most beautiful living things a person can stand beneath. And then the flowers fade, the color drains from the canopy, and the vine spends the rest of the year as bare, twisting branches on a steel frame, quietly gathering its strength to do it all again. Number 6. The Avenue of the Baobabs, Madagascar. Along an unpaved stretch of road in the Manabe region of western Madagascar, between the towns of Morondava and Beloni Tsiribihina, stands one of the most iconic natural sights in Africa. For about 260 meters, a grove of enormous baobab trees lines both sides of the dirt track, their massive, smooth trunks rising straight up for tens of meters before exploding into a tangle of branches at the very top. At sunset, when their silhouettes go dark against a burning sky, the scene looks like something from another world entirely. These are Grandidier's baobabs, Adansonia grandidieri, the largest of Madagascar's baobab species, standing around 30 meters tall. Their trunks are the key to their survival, thick cylinders of soft, fibrous, water-storing wood. A single large baobab trunk can hold as much as 120,000 liters of water, an internal reservoir that carries the tree through Madagascar's long, dry season. That is why the baobab is sometimes called the tree of life, and why its swollen, bottle-like shape looks so unlike any tree from a temperate climate. There is a strange detail about their age. Because baobabs do not grow in ordinary annual rings and can hollow themselves out as they age, dating them is difficult, and research has produced surprising results. While some of the trees in the avenue are said to be well over 800 years old, careful study of individual specimens has sometimes returned much younger stem ages, revealing that a baobab's true history is written in a way that does not match its enormous appearance. The avenue is now a protected natural monument, and for good reason. These trees are survivors of forests that once covered far more of the island, left standing in open farmland after the woodland around them was cleared. They are, in a sense, ghosts of a lost landscape, ancient giants marooned in a country that has changed enormously around them, still holding their water, still catching the last light of every day. Number 5. Methuselah, the United States. High in the White Mountains of eastern California, above 10,000 feet on a pale, wind-blasted slope where almost nothing else can survive, grows the oldest known single tree on Earth. It does not look majestic. It is a great basin bristlecone pine, gnarled and half dead, its trunk twisted into a ribbon of bare, weathered wood with only a thin strip of living bark keeping it alive. Its name is Methuselah, and by recent counts, it is around 4,850 years old. Take a moment to sit with that number. This tree was already a mature, ancient organism when the Great Pyramid of Giza was being built. It was alive through the entire span of recorded human civilization, through the rise and fall of every empire you have ever read about, and it is still alive today. It was cored and dated by a dendrochronologist named Edmund Shulman of the University of Arizona's Laboratory of Tree Ring Research, whose work in the 1950s revealed that these unremarkable-looking pines were among the oldest things on the planet. The secret to Methuselah's longevity is, counterintuitively, the brutality of where it grows. The soil there is dolomite, a pale alkaline limestone that most plants refuse to grow in. The wind sandblasts the trunk for most of the year. Nutrients are scarce, and the growing season is painfully short. In response, the bristlecone grows extraordinarily slowly, producing wood that is exceptionally dense and saturated with resin, so tough that it resists rot, insects, and fire. The tree survives precisely because its life is so hard. In a gentler place, it would grow faster, softer, and die far younger. There is one more detail that makes Methuselah feel like something out of a fable. The United States Forest Service refuses to reveal its exact location. Somewhere in that ancient bristlecone forest, among thousands of other twisted pines, stands the oldest tree of them all, and the rangers will not point it out. It is protected by anonymity, hidden in plain sight, a nearly 5,000-year-old survivor that almost no one will ever knowingly stand in front of. Number 4. The Wollemi Pine, Australia. In 1994, a New South Wales Parks officer and canyoner named David Noble was exploring a remote gorge in Wollemi National Park in the rugged country west of Sydney, Australia. Deep in an isolated canyon system, he came across a stand of tall, strange trees he did not recognize. He took a sample back to be identified. What the botanists concluded stunned the scientific world. Noble had not found a rare tree. He had found a living dinosaur. The Wollemi pine, Wollemia nobilis, was known to science, but only from fossils. Its lineage stretches back more than 200 million years, to a time when dinosaurs walked the earth, and it was believed to have gone extinct somewhere between 70 and 90 million years ago. For all that time, it existed only as impressions in ancient rock. And then, in a hidden gorge just a few hours from one of Australia's largest cities, a handful of them were found still alive, a species that had quietly outlived the dinosaurs by tens of millions of years without anyone knowing. The entire wild population is astonishingly small. Fewer than 100 individual trees survive, confined to a single canyon system, which makes the Wollemi pine one of the rarest tree species in the world. The authorities understood immediately how fragile that was. The precise location of the grove was kept a closely guarded secret, and it remains so to this day, to protect the trees from disease and from souvenir hunters. A single introduced fungus carried in on someone's boot could wipe out the entire wild species. The story of the Wollemi pine is a strange kind of hope. It is proof that even now, even on a planet mapped and photographed from space, there are still living things that have hidden from us for millions of years. A tree that the fossil record had already declared dead was standing all along in a canyon, waiting, its exact home known to only a handful of people on Earth. Number 3. The rainbow eucalyptus, the Philippines. There is a tree native to the Philippines, Indonesia, and Papua New Guinea whose trunk looks, quite literally, like it has been painted by an artist. Streaks of bright green, blue, violet, orange, maroon, and yellow wind around the bark in vertical bands, blending and shifting into one another. Standing in a grove of them, you would swear the colors were artificial, that someone had gone through the forest with brushes. But the rainbow eucalyptus produces every bit of that color entirely on its own. The tree is Eucalyptus diglupta, and it holds a small distinction as the only eucalyptus species native to the northern hemisphere. The secret to its colors lies in the way it sheds its bark. Throughout the year, the tree continuously drops thin strips of its outer bark, but it does so unevenly, in scattered patches all over the trunk. Each time a patch falls away, it exposes fresh inner bark underneath, and that fresh bark is bright green, rich with chlorophyll. Then the chemistry begins. As each newly exposed patch ages in the open air, the chlorophyll slowly breaks down and other pigments take over. Anthocyanins bring out the reds and purples. Carotenoids produce the oranges and yellows. Because every patch of bark is shed at a different time, every patch is at a different stage of this aging process at any given moment. One area is bright green, freshly revealed. Another has matured to blue and purple. Another has aged all the way to deep orange and red. The result is a living, slowly changing painting that is never the same from one week to the next. No two rainbow eucalyptus trees look alike, and no single tree looks the same twice. The colors are a byproduct of an ordinary process, bark shedding happening in an extraordinary way. It is one of the clearest examples in nature of beauty emerging not from design, but from timing. From thousands of small patches of bark quietly aging out of sync with one another, turning an entire trunk into a spectrum. Number 2. Pando, the United States. In Utah, in the Fish Lake National Forest, there is an aspen grove that looks like tens of thousands of ordinary trees spread across a hillside. It is not tens of thousands of trees, it is one. Every trunk, all 47,000 of them, is a genetically identical stem sprouting from a single, enormous, interconnected root system beneath the ground. The whole thing is one organism, and it has a name. It is called Pando, from the Latin for eye spread, and it may be one of the oldest and heaviest living things that has ever existed. The scale of Pando is almost impossible to comprehend. It covers around 106 acres, roughly 43 hectares, and weighs an estimated 6,000 tons or more, which makes it the heaviest single living organism ever recorded. Its age is the subject of ongoing research and genuine scientific debate. Estimates have ranged as high as 80,000 years, and analysis of aspen pollen in the sediment of nearby Fish Lake supports the idea that Pando has been growing on this spot for many thousands of years, an organism potentially older than modern human civilization by an order of magnitude. Pando survives by cloning itself. When one of its trunks dies, the shared root system sends up new shoots, called suckers, to replace it, so the organism as a whole simply continues, endlessly renewing its own parts. In theory, an organism like this could live almost forever. But that is exactly what has scientists worried, because Pando is dying. Researchers have found that across much of the grove, the old trunks are aging and falling, and few new ones are surviving to replace them. The cause, it turned out, was maddeningly ordinary. Mule deer and cattle, grazing in the forest, have been eating the tender young shoots almost as fast as Pando can produce them, breaking the cycle of renewal that has sustained the organism for millennia. Where scientists have built fences to keep the grazers out, thousands of new stems have surged back within a few years. One of the oldest living things on Earth, it turns out, is being quietly eaten to death, and whether it survives may depend entirely on us. Number 1. The dragon's blood tree, Socotra. Off the coast of Yemen, isolated in the Arabian Sea, lies the island of Socotra, a place so biologically strange that it is sometimes called the most alien-looking location on Earth. And the creature that defines it, the living thing found on postcards and documentaries and every photograph of the island, is a tree that looks like nothing else in the world. It is the dragon's blood tree, Dracaena chinnabari, and to see one for the first time is to be genuinely unsure whether you are looking at a plant or a sculpture. Its shape is unmistakable. A thick trunk rises from the ground and then splits again and again into a dense mass of upward-reaching branches, all of them ending at the same level and packed so tightly with leaves that they form a solid, flat-topped dome. It looks exactly like an umbrella turned inside out, or a giant green mushroom, and that shape is not an accident. On an arid island with little rainfall, the canopy funnels moisture from mist and drizzle down through the branches to the roots, while shading the ground beneath it to reduce evaporation. The tree's own body is a water-collecting machine, refined over an almost unimaginable span of time. Then there is the blood. When the bark or leaves are cut, the tree bleeds a deep red sap, and it dries into a resin the color of dried blood. This resin, known as dragon's blood, has been prized since antiquity, traded across the ancient world and used as a dye, a medicine, and a varnish for thousands of years. It is the reason the tree earned its name, and part of the reason it has been so relentlessly harvested. Botanists describe Dracaena chinnabari as a Cenozoic relict, a survivor from a vanished age, part of a woodland community that is among the oldest and most endangered on the planet. And it is fading. Over the last 2 decades, researchers have documented a serious decline in the dragon's blood tree population across Socotra. The island is growing drier, the mists the tree depends on are less reliable, grazing animals eat the seedlings before they can establish, and the old trees are not being replaced. The umbrella forests that have crowned this island for millions of years are thinning, and one day, if nothing changes, Socotra may lose the very thing that makes it look like another world. So there they are, 15 trees that seem to belong to some other planet, and every single one of them growing quietly on this one. A tree in Brazil that wears its fruit on its skin. A tree in the Mexican desert shaped like an upside-down carrot. A silhouette of quiver trees burning against a Namibian sunset, and a Cambodian temple slowly being swallowed by its own forest. The widest trunk in the world standing in a Mexican town square, and a single lonely tree surviving in an empty Bahraini desert. A tree in India that is really a forest, and a sequoia in California that outweighs every other living thing on Earth. A vine in Japan that becomes a ceiling of flowers, an avenue of baobabs holding their water against the Madagascar sky, and a 5,000-year-old pine hidden somewhere in the White Mountains. A dinosaur pine that survived a secret canyon. A eucalyptus that paints itself in every color. An ancient organism in Utah that is quietly being eaten alive, and a tree on a lonely island that bleeds red and looks like it grew on Mars. The strangest thing about all of them is that they are real. Not myths, not art, not the invention of someone's imagination, but living things you could stand beside if you knew where to look and if they are still there when you arrive. Because the quiet thread running through so many of these stories is loss. The dragon's blood forests are thinning. Pando is being grazed away. The quiver trees are retreating. The Wollemi pine hangs on by fewer than 100 individuals in a single hidden gorge. These trees have survived for thousands, sometimes millions of years, through ice ages and empires and the slow drift of continents. Whether they survive the next 100 is, in more cases than we would like to admit, up to us. If you made it all the way to the end, tell us in the comments which of these trees you would most want to stand beneath before it changes forever. And if this made you look at the trees outside your own window a little differently, subscribe, because there is a whole planet of strange and beautiful things still left to explore.